Morning. I think I got the rickety chair. So if this goes straight to the ground at any point in time, I'm going to, by faith, do this. If I go to the ground, though, this is portable, so I'll just finish class from the ground, okay? Because I'm not getting back up. Sorry about the hoodie, but it's cold. It'd be a perfect morning for a big old thick sweater. I don't own any of those, so I had to go with this. What was that? I knew that was coming from somebody. Where's Lance? I was expecting that from Lance. Yes, I'm from Ohio, and this should be nothing to me, and there was a time where it wasn't. But I've been here a long time. Harding counts. Last week, I really enjoyed hearing where everybody saw God. That to me is better than any intro I could come up with. So I'd like to do that again with just a slight twist, because we're talking about the undeniability of God and His existence. And so I'd like for us to share moments in our lives where God was just undeniable. There's no other explanation than God for these moments in our lives. We have those. We don't get an opportunity to share them very often. So think of a time in your life where there's just absolutely no other explanation than God was there. And He did this. Take a moment to think about that. There are times where in my life it's undeniable, and it's very easy for me to go to the war, but I could go to a tornado that picked me up in Cabot, Arkansas, while I was driving down the road at 65 miles an hour on a night that the Discovery Channel did a special on, because it broke the record for the number of tornadoes touched down in that county ever. And one of them picked me up in my car. It was raining horribly, and that wasn't enough for me to get off the road, because I had a new CD player that I'd put in my little Ford Escort. And the rain's going like this, and it's horrible, and it starts getting windy, and then the rain starts doing this, going sideways. And then all of a sudden the rain starts getting picked up off the ground, and then the car just went zoop like that, and then it just sort of put me back down, and I hydroplaned multiple times, and spilled my coffee all over my Nino Cerruti suit. I was coming home from S&K Menswear. I was a sales manager there. But that tornado went on and did multiple millions of dollars of damage to was it Cabot? Beebe, Arkansas. Right there at that exchange. So the one that did all that damage is the one that sort of picked me up. And there's just no other way for me to look at that and go, that's not because I've done anything right. That was God saying, okay, you have work to do, right? Going to leave you here. Going to give you a little warning, though. Slow it down. Stay off the road. Be smart, right? But that's just one of those moments that I point to and say, that was God. So what are some of your moments? Yeah.
Gave her the word, and God put that all in her, right? Like that desire that was just there.
The Word did the work. Yeah.
I mean, we pray about that kind of thing, right? Like, oh, the hearts you're preparing for us to meet and share with. But he was like, yeah, you're
Wow.
She even had the wherewithal to say, you know what, and I want to change my name. I said, really? She said, yeah, after I'm baptized, I'm a new person. I need a new name. And she said, so what name? She said, Miriam. I want to be called Miriam now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was just like, yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. Come to you.
In Jackson, Tennessee, in the church we moved to there, we had a child, 5, 6 years old, I don't remember now. She had a tumor in the back of her head, the size of a baseball. Lots of prayers for many years over the child. She went to Memphis to have surgery. We got her there that day, rolled her in, and it was gone. It was gone.
Wow.
Doctor put her hand in the answer.
We did. Right? We know. That's amazing.
Last year, Mother's Day, I had a pregnancy. I was raining, it was pouring, and we were lucky. Then did really good. We just went through the side. We were lucky that we didn't get by other cars. It was pouring. Ben and I, we have a couple seconds to get ready for the impact, but Ethan was on his phone, so he didn't see it until he felt it. And when we got out of the cars, I was gonna cross 75 to find a place where he and I we can wait. And I see someone in the parking lot flashing his lights, and I was like, "What is this guy doing?" You know, when I got closer, was Warren. He saw us and he took us home. So it was God taking care of us so well. So,
Wow.
yeah.
That's awesome.
When I was in Panama City, Florida, I was stopped at a red light, and I had a baby in the infancy. My light turned green, she started crying, and I hesitated and turned around. Just at that time, a semi blared
Ooh.
through and ran the red light. If I had to turn around and stop, we would have both been dead. So I just felt like that was God intervening.
Yeah. There was a hand over here. Yeah.
I changed my story. I was going to tell one. I'm telling.
Okay.
I'll tell one to remember. Hilltop pavement. Sean and I would go there with my grandfather. We'd walk into his ring, he'd read the Bible. Every time we walk in his ring, he'd read the Bible. After he'd read the Bible, a little time would pass and we'd visit with him. He would walk down, they had like a little sunroom or something on the west side of the building. He would go down there with 2 or 3 other men, one of them being Tilly S. Tedley, who wrote over 100 gospel songs. And they would start singing. And their songs would just be heaven. And I'll never forget, I'm sure wonder hearing that.
Yeah. That's a feeling of awe, right? That's evidence right there. We got time for one more.
Several years ago, I had the opportunity to go elk hunting up in the mountains, on the border of Wyoming and Colorado. And there was a winter storm coming in, I remember it snowing. And just for about 10 minutes, as the sun was coming up, and I watched the sun come up at about 10,000 feet. And that, there was snow falling as well. And it just looked like diamonds in the sky. That's all that was, and it was so peaceful. You could hear the snow in the top of the snow.
Yeah.
And be still and know that I am God. I was thinking the whole time.
We don't do that enough. We just don't do that enough, right? Our lives get busy, and it's so rare the moments that you just sit and be still, and that knowledge presents itself. You know, I am God, right? If we could be still. I could do this all day. I love this kind of thing. So, in most of those stories, except for the ones that are awe based, just seeing and feeling that, that tornado picked me up and then set me back down. The people in BB weren't as lucky. So that's one of the things that unbelievers will look at and say, I guess nobody in BB who got damaged by the storm believes in God. Is that your logic? Right? No, that's not our logic, right? And that's one of those footholds that will always be there. And honestly, is that not a question that we don't have to? Really? Every time you pray that you get the job, what's the other side of that coin? Somebody's not getting that job, right? Someone who may very well have prayed for that job, right? And there's a reason. And I see that reason in, Peter and John healing the lame man at the Gate Beautiful in the temple, who'd been there for how many years? Does anybody remember? He'd been there every day for 30 years. Every day for 30 years at the Gate Beautiful, at the temple. Did Jesus ever use the Gate Beautiful to enter the temple? Think about that for a second. Now, are we told in Scripture that he used the Gate Beautiful? No, it's an assumption that you can make. Was he in the temple a lot? I think the answer to that is yes. Did he see that man? He knew where the woman at the well was. He knew what she was. He knew who she was. He didn't heal that man then, right? You know what happened as a consequence when Peter healed that man? The church grew by thousands, right? Lewis talks about knocking on the door and not getting an answer. He talks about this in Grief Observed. I have questions. I knock on the door and I get no answer, right? Why is there no answer? Are there answers that you're not questioning? Or are you leaving me to suffer? And he said the answer to those in those times may simply be peace. Be still and know that I am God. You don't understand yet. So how does the world sort of make sense of that? And one of the favorite ways to dismiss Christianity and get a good laugh out of a crowd, if the opportunity presents itself these days, is to present a simplified or overly simplified version of Christianity and then attack that as nonsensical. Okay? We talked about straw man a few weeks ago, what that looks like when someone does that. And that's one of the favorite attacks of Christianity as a whole. Simplify it into basically like a nursery story, right? A fable that we tell our children, and then attack that version of it. And it kind of looks like this. It sounds like this. You expect me to believe in an old bearded grandpa in the sky who's watching everyone and insists that I be nice to everyone. Okay, you see how you simplify that? Anybody ever heard that? I can't stand that. I hear that. You expect me to believe in this grandpa in the sky, this Santa Claus person in the sky who knows my heart and knows when I've done right and wrong. That's easy to attack, okay? Belief, in fact, is complicated. And on some levels, we start to, those same questions, we share the same questions. We just have faith to bolster, an answer to them, okay? But belief, in fact, is complicated. If it weren't, books like this wouldn't exist, for one. Okay? And there are no simple answers to complex questions or problems. And what is the problem that most non-believers point out most often? That the world is a jacked up place. It just is. Can anyone honestly, as believers, as a room full of believers, is anyone going to say, no, the world's not messed up? No. Because we have the same question at multiple times in our lives. Why does this happen? Why was I set down by the tornado? And then it went on to do multiple millions of dollars worth of damage to businesses and a church that's right over the overpass, right? Why? If God made this world, why is it bad or seemingly meaningless sometimes? And it's easy to shove that question off on non-believers, right? Until we really wrestle with the fact that we have the same questions ourselves. If the God who made the universe is good, or is a good God, why is it so often brutal, dangerous, meaningless, and painful? And on the spiritual side of the house, the attempt to answer that question comes in at least two different categories. And that is dualism and Christianity. Okay? And once again, one has a tendency to invade the other. And so we need to be aware of how one can invade the other and the implications of that invasion. In terms of offering simple answers to complex questions, are we guilty of that at times? I mean, it's like 10 people immediately, no thought, yes. Yes, we are. Can you think of the top 10 simple answers to complicated questions that we ourselves give? Can you think of any of them? Share out. You know,
It's a fallen world.
It's a fallen world. That's a wonderful one. It's a true statement, right? It is absolutely a fallen world. That's a wonderful way to discount someone's pain. Right? Oh, I'm sorry you're experiencing loss. It's basically saying, what do you do? It's a fallen world, and no follow-up to it, right? One of my favorites is, believe it or not, Acts 2:38. In response to which verse that is used to negate the necessity of baptism? John 3:16, right? John 3:16, countered by Acts 2:38, end of discussion, we win, right? Game, set, match. And that's... There might be too much laughing at that at this point, because you know we've all had those conversations, right? Where it just becomes a shooting match, right? And whoever can get to 238 first wins, all right? And whoever wants 316 to be the end all and be all loses, right? But if you flip the coin, it's the same, right? They feel they have won. Okay? So the simple answer to someone saying, yeah, but I don't, give me John 3:16 real quick as a group. For God nicely done. Heard some King James. I heard some NIV. Sprinkling of the message. Heard a Living Bible. Shame on you. Where kidding. Don't you love those wars? But anyway, what's that?
Gen Z Bible's out, so be ready.
Gen Z. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry. Honey lose. But why is Acts 2:38 a simple response to John 3:16? You don't even have to. Do you have to leave the chapter? Do you have to leave John chapter 3 to counter the idea that baptism isn't essential? You don't, but you just can't wait to jump in there and get that buzz verse in there, before the bell happens, right? Before round 2, right? I've got to get my last hit in. What is John chapter 3? Who's talking in John chapter 3? Jesus and who? Nicodemus. My man. I love that guy. Because you just see the stages of belief in him, right? Initially, it's, hey, you need to just keep it down, right? Keep it down. And then, in his meeting with his buddies, right, he's like, does our law work that way? And you're like, he's defending. And then at the end, he's with who? Collecting Jesus' body. Yeah, of Arimathea. How awesome is that? I mean, you get to see that, right? You get to see that summer. That girl, the Bible you gave to, you get to see that with Nicodemus. Terrific. But he's talking to Nicodemus about what? New birth. Born again of water. And Nicodemus is like, I can't go back into my mother. What are you talking about? And you sort of see that, again, that moment where it's just like, peace. Be still. I got this, okay? And here's the thing. Just like we talked about last week, that Peter can't go with Jesus now, right? Don't worry, Nicodemus. It's confusing now, but you're going to get it, right? But the simple answer is to just say, Acts 2:38. And then there's no discussion, right? Because you've successfully, hit your target. That's a simple answer. Another simple answer to me is, where the Bible is silent, we are silent. Which, no? Oh, there's some strange sounds happening right now. Where the Bible is silent, we are silent. Which, frankly, is a fine thing to say. Isn't it? Isn't it true? I don't know. It's certainly, there's some, but here's the thing. And let me add some context to it. Where the Bible is silent, we are silent is all well and fine, as long as it's not basically a preface to mounting an argument against something. Does that make sense? Because if where the Bible is silent, we are silent, what should we do afterwards? Okay? But too often it looks like this. Well, where the Bible is silent, we are silent. So let me tell you why you're wrong and going to hell. Okay? That's very often how that's used. But if we're silent where the Bible is silent, then we need to be silent where the Bible is silent. Right? So back to dualism and Christianity as the world looks for simple answers to complex problems. Dualism is the belief that good and evil are equal forces in the universe and are constantly at war. How awesome does that sound? Lewis says that's the most masculine, nearest, Christianity, which frankly is crazy masculine. But that's like the most masculine, theory or ideology nearest Christianity, right? It's classically romantic that you have these two forces that are equally matched, right? That are constantly going at it, and the equality of their match is actually balance, right? And you see that a lot in Eastern philosophies, right? That balance of good and evil in the universe as equal powers. Anyone familiar with the yin-yang? Right? One side, other side. But what's in the center of the mass of each side? The opposing color. Right? It's great. I love it. So much literature, so many movies. Right? So much is based on that. But there's a problem with it. And it kind of looks like this. Because the devil is in the details. And I'll go through this quickly so we can move on. The equality of the two forces calls into existence, makes a third power necessary. And this is something that Lewis brings out that I hadn't considered. If the two powers are equal, and we understand that one is good and one is bad, then there has to be a standard that came from somewhere else. The standard can't come from the good side and impose it on the bad side, because then they're no longer what? They're no longer equal. So this classically romantic masculine, idea, that's out there in the universe that sounds so cool. There's a devil in the detail, because it's invaded Christianity in that we place God in that one side, the right and the wrong. Now, is there constantly warfare, spiritual warfare? Yes, that's very clear. Okay? But to take one and substitute the other and say, yes, the forces of good and bad are equal, and God is the team captain of team good, and Satan is team captain of team bad, then whose mandates are they following or not? Who decides? Because if they're equal, then can you tell one from the other without a standard? So the idea that both sides are equal calls into question another higher power. And if we've already placed God here, then God is no longer what? Starts with an S, ends with an ovren. I do that to my high school kids all the time. And they never see it coming. So what you do in that, in granting credibility to those two sides being equal is you remove the sovereignty of God. Okay? And once you remove the sovereignty of God, then you can look at the world and say it's messed up, and that's okay. It's not our job to set it right. They're battling it out. They'll do the work. We're collateral damage. It's not our fault. Okay? We don't need to go about fixing it. It'll be handled. Do you see the problem with that idea? It removes God's sovereignty, and it also removes a need to communicate with one, to communicate with God, to pray, to commune with God through his Son, Jesus Christ. Okay? Now, Christianity, obviously, is nearer dualism in the existence of good and evil, but with a very important distinction. The sides are not equal, okay? And if you look at literature, the greatest literature, you've got your protagonist, we'll just say the good guy, and your antagonist, the bad guy. And a good representation of that, and your best literature will have who's stronger, the good guy or the bad guy? Huh? The bad guy. The best literature, the bad guy is going to be stronger than the good guy, because the good guy must win with superior morals, superior intellect, or teamwork. Right? Most often teamwork. Christianity, wonderfully, does it the opposite, right? God is more powerful than the other. God does take sides, okay? And it would be another series to talk about the nature and origins of Satan and sin and everything else. But stating to an unbeliever that we live in enemy-occupied territory brings up honest questions as well. Because do we or do we not exist in enemy-occupied territory? Yes, we do. The prince of this world refers to whom? Satan. The prince of the air refers to the same being. Okay? And one of the greatest tricks the devil ever pulled, not to quote Usual Suspects and the elusive Kaiser Soze, but the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he didn't exist. Are we or are we not in the middle of that right now? Are we going to talk about horns and pitchforks now? Cloven hooves? Lewis ends that brilliantly by saying, I don't know about horns, I don't know about pitchforks, and I don't know what he looks like. What I do know is that if you want to meet him, you will. And I don't think that's going to go so well. Right? The idea of enemy-occupied territory. You can tell the book was written in the 40s and 50s, right? Because the idea of enemy-occupied territory had a very different connotation to the readers at the time. The dire, circumstances of being in enemy-occupied territory were basically how you got through life in the 40s and 50s of Europe, and certainly Eastern Europe. Not so connotatively important here, but we get it. But stating to an unbeliever that we live in enemy-occupied territory brings up an honest question or two. Is the state of affairs in accordance with God's will, or is it not? And if it is, then that is a strange God indeed that you worship. If it is not, then how can anything happen contrary to his will if he is all-powerful? Okay, now I don't know if anyone can raise their hand and say that they've never wondered the same thing. It's sort of what we talked about before. And the honesty of that admission is gold to a non-believer. If a non-believer were to ask these questions of you or of me, I can respond one of a couple different ways. I can say, well, you just don't understand yet. which is not exactly relationship building, right? No, yeah, step into God's shoes. No, peace, you don't understand. We don't fill those shoes, right? So we can do that. We can, basically let them know that they just don't have the knowledge yet and to wait for it. Or we can say, I struggle with that too. Because I do. I do struggle with that. I struggle with seeing the why at times when horrible things happen. Don't you? Does anyone not? Right? But that can be one of those dragons we talked about a few weeks ago that you got to see through. You got to fight it and get through to the other side where wisdom can be gained, because wisdom's not going to be gained if you turn away from that question and just ignore it. Okay? So how do you answer the question? Free will. Now, can that be a simple answer to a complex question? It can be if I just say free will and walk away, right? But the concept of it, if you really want to go down that rabbit hole, Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris went at it for almost 4 hours 4 years ago and got nowhere. Okay? Two of the greatest minds that you can pick out of any crowd, and they got nowhere in 4 hours going at it. Okay? And you have a believer and an atheist, and neither one of them made any ground. They had to do it again. They're like, you know what, that was awful. Let's do this again, okay? And they did it again, okay? So about 7 hours worth of talk about free will. We don't have that kind of time, so let me bring it down this way, okay? The elders hand out a questionnaire. I already see faces kind of go, okay. The elders hand out a questionnaire, and they say that the gathering data needed to make a particular decision. It is the will of the elders that you fill out this questionnaire, and they make the importance clear that they need everyone to do this and bring it back next Sunday. How many come back? Howie's getting mad right now, okay? Bart says 3, okay? I don't know how many we got in here. How many do we have in here? About 70, how much? 50, 60 people? All right? How many? How many? I tell you what I'm going to do with mine, okay? So I can let everyone who does this off the hook, because I do it. I get the questionnaire, I'm like, sweet, can't wait. Fold it up. Where do I put it? In my Bible, with about 3 other questionnaires that I didn't get to, okay? And half a dozen bulletins, right, that are in there with notes like, hey, where are we going for lunch? All right? You got them too. So, all right? Now, they told you what their will was, right? Their will is to fill this out, bring it back. 3 out of 70 are going to bring it back, right, with a smile. All right? Maybe one of those 3 is like, all right. Now, let's flip the script a little bit. Same scenario. The elders stand up here and they say, this is what we need, questionnaire, blah, 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 and we need it next Sunday. We need this for decision making on, a particular, decision. And at that point in time, our fine security goes to the door, each door, okay, unholstered. One might say. I can say that in Texas, right? Unholstered, right? Unholstered, and they tell you, you're not leaving. On to Shannon. You're not leaving until we get the questionnaire. Now, I love Crow's Buffet. If you haven't been to Crow down in Anna, I'm telling you, steak fingers on a buffet. That's called all you can eat. All right? Now, when those weapons get unholstered, I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to be filling out that questionnaire as quickly as I can, and I'm getting to Crow. All right? Or Firehouse Sub. It's a toss-up. Either way, I'm filling out the questionnaire. Fine. Are they going to get 100% compliance? Yeah, they will. How many of you coming back next week? Three. Right? Yeah. See, anybody with a weapon's coming back next week, right? Okay. So, all right. So, in those 2 scenarios, would you actually ask somebody, why in the world why is there so much chaos? It's just a questionnaire. Because there's free will involved. No one's making you do it. Okay? The elders are still the elders. right? But no one's making you do it. But their will is known. They tell you what their will is, and you, as free will human beings, either do it or you don't, but it's up to you, and we're talking about the church, right? We haven't even started talking about the street. Okay, so why is the universe in the position that it is? Why can we say that there's an all-powerful God controlling that? Or who created that? It's because he created us to be free in what we will choose and what we will not. Okay? Garden of Eden. When creation was in its perfection. Right? What did God tell Adam and Eve? You got one job. Okay? You got one job. Don't eat from that tree. Okay? And we all know it was Eve's fault. There wasn't. I'm kidding, all right? Some people got way too mad there, just for a second. I'm kidding, right? So we had one job, right? When the universe was at its perfection, we couldn't handle the one job because we have what? Free will. Was there an angel standing guard at the tree? Huh?
There was after.
Only after, right? It wasn't the tree, it was the whole place. You're not coming back in. Right? But you had free will even when the universe was at its perfection. We couldn't handle it. Okay, we couldn't handle it. You got a hand up?
You know, the people that don't believe, they want to make Eve do what God wants her to do. And that's what they say. Why didn't he make them do what he wanted them to do? And they blame God for that.
Well, simple answer to a complicated question, isn't it? Simple answer to a complicated question. It's simple because it's simple, right? It's easier to do so that you can dismiss it and be done with it. Now, So, Adam and Eve couldn't handle it. We certainly can't handle it now. And so, if this is how God wants to order the universe, then how are we supposed to know? What has he done? Right? And I love the way, what has he done to help in a universe that's full of free will and chaos? And I love the way Lewis puts this. He sort of sums it up this way. He left us a conscience, the moral law written on our souls. We spent weeks looking at that. 2, he sent the human race what he calls good dreams. I love this idea. Stories scattered throughout pagan religions about a creator God, about a flood, about a God who dies and is resurrected, giving new life to mankind. And I love this argument from atheists who say, this story's everywhere. Why wouldn't it be? Right? Well, that story's in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Sounds like nowhere to me. It's like, excellent. Okay. If everyone's writing about it, guess what? Probably because it happened. Okay? So he leaves us these good dream moments, right? And 3, he selects a particular group of people, the Jews, to spend a couple of centuries hammering it into their heads what kind of God he is, that there's only one of him, and that he cares about right conduct. Okay? And number 4, then comes the real shock. From among the Jews, there suddenly turns up a man who goes about talking as if he was God and claims to forgive sins, says he's always existed, said he will come back and judge mankind at the end of all days and the end of the world. And that's just crazy. You can't come up with that. That's not good fiction. Okay? It's crazy. All right? Now, Lewis focuses on one aspect of the list that I gave you, and that's the forgiving of sins part. And I'll run through this as quickly as I can. because there's part of it that he says in a way that I haven't considered. So you're at home and a neighbor throws a rock through your window. There's no reason, just throws a rock straight through your window. Okay? You go outside and confront this person verbally. What is your major malfunction? Why did you throw a rock through my window? You're going to replace it, and if you don't, we're going to end up in court, and I'm going to post it on the neighborhood social media site. Okay? I don't know which one of those threats is worse. Okay? That neighbor throws a rock through your window and says, you know what, I'm sorry, do you forgive me? I see forgiveness as you no longer owe me for anything. That's how I see forgiveness. Okay, that's my own personal definition, because I think that's meted out pretty well in Scripture. If you've given me a personal slight or something like that, and I forgive you, then you don't owe me for that anymore. But now I got a broken window. And he asks me for forgiveness. If forgiveness is right, then does he owe me for the window? Who's tempted to say yes? Okay, so freeze that scenario for 1 second. A second neighbor comes across the street, walks into your yard, goes up to the guy who threw the rock through your window and goes, don't worry about it, man, I forgive you. My response to that is, excuse me? Not your offense to forgive. But isn't that exactly what Jesus did? And what he's offering? Have you ever considered that side? When he said, I'm going to forgive your sins, did he say, I'm going to check with everybody you slighted first, and then I'm going to forgive you the sin?